storyline. Oh, my phone is dying. I have to
Oh
plug. I have
no.
to. Oh yeah, let me
Okay.
just run and get my plug. But
Okay.
please, if you need to move on, please do. I'm just want to run.
I'm gonna let
I'll be right back.
Kaylin talk about Candyman first.
Awesome. All right. Candyman, the 2022 film, 30 years after the one that I previously talked about. Um, so about that baby growing up to have a very interesting life. He's now 30 years old. And again, this is kind of cool because like Tim and I were born the year that the first one came out. So like this character is literally our age, which is always just fun.
Anthony.
So he's now 30 years old. He comes back to that neighborhood. He's under the impression that he grew up somewhere else. Basically, his mother tried to shelter him from the very freaking traumatic infancy that he had, where he was kidnapped and almost burned to a fucking crisp. Uh, so, understandable. That's actually not revealed until like, towards the end of the film, but it helps for the framing of talking about this in relation to the other one, which is the whole point of why I'm talking about both of these. So he comes back to that neighborhood. He's inspired by all of the art there. He's an artist. He has in fact grown up to be a painter. He and his partner are they're both artists. They're in the art world. She's helping him out, trying to get him connections so that he can do like a really good art show. She's trying to build up her career as well. And he becomes absolutely obsessed with and fascinated by all of the Candyman stuff when he starts hearing about it for some reason. It's just really interesting. So he becomes really, really obsessed with it. And whereas the first film kind of gets into like, folklore and stuff in general, the stories in general, this one really goes into like, okay, but why do we have those stories? Why do we need those stories? And it really focuses on like, okay, so we've got this like serial killing guy that was lynched in this really horrific way and is out for revenge and or getting reunited with the reincarnation of the woman he loved or whatever. But also like, why do we need that story in general? And so for this community, what basically the film I think is trying to say is that they need that story to deal with all of the terrible things that are done to them. So we have this like low income, poor Black community, and all of these atrocious, terrible things are happening. Brittany was talking about this before, like talking about this kind of a crime in like modern times and everything. It's like you realize that Candyman's origin story isn't that long ago. That is like living memory for just a few generations ago. Like if I think back to like, my grandparents were born in the 30s, like their parents and grandparents were alive at that time. It's crazy to think about. Like
My
it really truly
grandfather,
is
my
not that long
paternal
ago.
grandfather, was born in 1882.
Yeah, so there you
Yeah.
go. It's really not that long ago. And I think that especially those of us who live in America and especially in North America and especially in the United States and Canada, like we think that 100 years is a long time ago. It really isn't. We think that 200 years ago is a long time ago. It really isn't. We are a very, very young nation
Yeah.
here in the United States. And I think that we just don't realize just how recent a lot of these events are. And it's like people talk about it like it's ancient history, and it's like, no, not even close. Like not even close. So
Well, that's where that
that was
intergenerational trauma
yeah.
it comes
So
in
like
because it's so recent that it's still, you know.
yeah. And that's very much what the 2022 Candyman film is really about. It's that intergenerational trauma. So like the origin story happens like in the late 19th century. And then the movie that came out in 92 is taking place at that time, end of the 20th century. So it's only been like about 100 years. And then fast forward to the 2022 film, that's only 30 years after that. My lifetime as a human being, Tim's lifetime as a human being,
I
this
think if
character's
you
lifetime as a human being.
Yeah, I think, I made a chart about Candyman one time when I was doing some literary archaeology thing, and I figured out just from inferences in the movies what year he was born. I don't remember, but
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure Daniel Robitaille was born like in the early 1860s. So
That sounds
yeah,
about right. Yeah, because I think I want to say they said that it was like the 1880s.
yeah, it's when he died.
Yeah.
He was young. He's probably 30 or younger.
Yeah, yeah. So,
And
about the same age as, Anthony, the
so we're
protagonist
talking
of
about like
this film.
160 years tops from the time he's
Yeah.
born to the time Anthony finds his legend.
That's
So,
only a handful of generations
I know.
depending on how old people were when they had kids, you know?
Mhm.
Like maximum, like, maybe like 4-ish generations, right? Like maximum. So all right, so he goes back to this place where he's from. He gets really obsessed with the Candyman stories. He ends up deciding that he wants to do art about it, basically, and so he starts researching a lot like Helen did. Very similar parallels there. So it's kind of like it feels almost initially like it's a retelling of the story, but it isn't. It's a direct sequel because this is a character
Yeah.
who existed in the previous film and now it's 30 years later, he's an adult.
It's like a it's like a cyclical thing. It's happening.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Another thing that's interesting about this one is that, like, when the Candyman story gets introduced in this particular film, they start telling the story, the legend and everything, but instead of it being about Candyman, it's about Helen, and it's about what happened with her 30 years ago. So it's a more recent urban legend talking about something that just happened not that long ago. Again, living memory, very recent.
Mhm.
And so it's about her story, and some of the things that you hear are off from what we watched in the first movie, which makes you think, okay, how much of it is like, her psychosis or her inaccurate perception? How much of it is the story being told and retold and like twisted, and
Yeah,
it's like a telephone game, and in the end the legend is not what it originally was?
yeah, like
How much of it is we were just wrong about the whole thing, and you don't really know initially. It's like, okay, so we're hearing a different version of the story. Basically, instead of it being like, oh, she did all of this, stuff and she saved this kid, it sounds like she snapped. She went absolutely crazy. She started killing people. She kidnapped this child, and thankfully they were able to stop her and everything was fine. So that's the version that we hear at the beginning of this, as told to Anthony and his girlfriend by his girlfriend's brother. Yeah. And his partner's there as well.
But you do have a
So
character who knows what actually happened. Well, you'll get to that.
yes, we'll get there. We will get there.
I just thought.
We'll get there. Sorry, that just I'm trying to think through like the plot and everything. I'm also getting tired because it's
I know.
late. Help me out here, friend.
Well, you were
I
telling
lost
me
my
that
train of thought.
they heard the Helen story, but it was different than what we saw.
Yes.
Him and his girlfriend heard it from people they knew, as
Mhm.
always happens with urban legends.
Exactly, yes. And it's like that. That's another cool thing about this, because like this is Black cinema and this is like storytelling in a Black community that also like gets at the oral traditions that you see in a lot of Black culture things, because that's traced back to like West African cultures where there was a lot of oral tradition, and that's how people told these stories, including both like legends and folklore, and also like literal like oral history and everything. It's passed down from person to person. And I find that really interesting as well. So he hears the story, he starts doing research, trying to figure out, what's going on with all of this. He interviews people, just like Helen did. He encounters this guy who, is telling him the story and telling him about what happened and everything. And this character starts to get into like why we need the stories, right? And it's not just about like, being a scary story. It's, like I said a bit ago, to deal with all of the terrible things that happen. It's a way to cope. You have this figure because, it's a way to like explain and engage with and kind of comprehend like hate crimes and things like that. So a little bit hazy on some of the plot details because, like I said, I've only seen this once, but I know I remember where it gets. I'm trying to remember all
Yeah.
of the like
Well,
breadcrumbs in between.
Yeah, what I remember is that you start hearing people tell the story of Candyman, and it's like a totally different,
Yeah.
racially motivated traumatic event. Because it's not Daniel Robitaille. They do tell his story, but they
Mhm.
tell several other black men's stories. And it's all,
Right.
and then at first I was kind of confused, but then I think it is. Well, I think, well, I don't know. You
It's
tell me
like
what
it's
you
like an
think.
amalgam. It's like an amalgamation of like all of these stories, and that's the point because Candyman isn't about one guy.
Right.
It's about the fact that this keeps freaking happening
Right.
to so many different people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the point of that, I think.
Yeah, you're right.
So basically where we end up in this one is so Candyman, the figure that we remember from the first movie, died in the fire, but needs to be back basically because that story needs to live on. The legend needs to continue. And so what happens is Anthony ends up becoming the new Candyman. He gets a hook for a hand, he gets attacked by the bees, all of that stuff. And so he becomes the new version of this. And his girlfriend is like horrified by all of this, of course, and is just like, no, this is really, really messed up. Absolutely not, you know? And then the police end up arriving on the scene, and there's also like a lot of commentary about policing in horror block communities throughout the film. Like it starts out very early. They bring this up, I was like, that's gonna be a theme later on. Noted for the end of the film, and then you see the flashing lights and everything, and you know, okay, things are going to go very badly from here. And of course, they end up shooting the guy who, you know, did this to Anthony, and he's the one who knew the true version of the story, also, as you were mentioning a bit ago. And so you know, they end up shooting him.
When does
Sister is
Anthony
absolutely
remind me? When does Anthony learn about himself being the baby? I forgot when
his mother told him about
he
that
goes to visit
when
his
he was
mother. Yeah,
he visits his mother. She tells him about that because, you know, he's talking about like the art and the research and everything. She's just like, oh no, like this
yeah,
is
she was
exactly
there.
the opposite of what I wanted to have happen, because she was basically trying to shield him from that. So she admits to him like, okay, actually you were born there. We lived there at the beginning of your life. This is what happened. I wanted to protect you from it, basically. And that like really speaks also to like Black motherhood and parenthood in general, and especially with boys, because this is something that all of my Black friends who have kids have talked about a lot. They talk about it on social media, they'll talk with it like, you know, privately, just fears that they have for their children and like wanting to protect them, and like navigating how much do you shield them from the world and how much do
Yeah.
you empower them to deal with the world. And like different people make different choices, obviously, and like this film is a situation that doesn't happen literally in this way to people. It's
Right.
it's an urban legend type of deal, you know, but it's still like it has that intergenerational trauma of like, okay, I know that the world is going to be very unsafe for my kid. What do I do to keep him as safe as I possibly can? And so she tries, but it's inevitable. He ends up going back there. He ends up getting traumatized anyway. He ends up getting killed anyway.
And that I forgot her name, but that's the only actress that plays the same character in a speaking role in both movies. And her
Yeah.
name, the actress's name is Vanessa Williams. And what's funny is she joined the Screen Actors Guild way before the Penthouse model did, who's now an actress and other things. What was she, a Miss America, something like that? And she got
I don't know.
great.
That's
Well,
not something I
anyway,
follow
when I
very
was growing
closely.
up, it was a big scandal because she was a Miss America, and then they found out she'd done faux lesbian porn and printed at Penthouse. So she dropped her crown or whatever. But anyway, long before she reinvented herself as a singer and actress, you know, when you join the Screen Actors Guild, once you claim a name, no one else can ever claim that same name. There can't be two people with the exact same name. So
Yeah.
Vanessa Williams is the woman's name, and she played in Candyman as Vanessa Williams. Well, since that, the other Vanessa Williams became an actress, and I don't know if they settled out of court or if our girl from Candyman retired for a while, but the original Vanessa Williams, who was an actress, relinquished the name to the more popular Miss America person. And so
Interesting.
when she had to go back into acting, she had to change her name to Vanessa L. Williams. So Vanessa L.
Okay.
Williams is the actress who plays Anthony's mother in both movies. But in
Interesting.
Candyman, the first one, she was known only as Vanessa Williams. And Vanessa Williams was a known person at that time, the more infamous one, but she was not in the Screen Actors Guild or an actor. So
Gotcha.
yeah, it's a weird.
That is really interesting. Thank you for that interesting, like, little tidbit of
Because somebody told me before I saw
yeah.
it, they're like, Vanessa Williams from Penthouse is in Candyman, this horror movie.
No, she's not.
Right, exactly.
She's not. Different person. What if I told you Vanessa and Williams are both very common names?
Yeah, who would think? Right?
You know?
Oh.
Oh my gosh. So I'm sorry, where were we?
Well, you said that she was. Well, she represents.
Oh yeah, end of the film.
All Black mothers really now, or maybe always. But I mean, everything you said, you heard. I hear a lot from Black women who have children, either on podcasts or in person or on social media, and it's more frightening than ever. I mean, and now that it is like Briggy said earlier, the thing with like people being killed or lynched or killed by cops. It hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
And it even goes through cycles where it gets worse.
It's still just as relevant now. Like that violence never stopped.
Yeah, the only difference is, quite honestly, is that that now people see it on social media and now they believe us. Right. Sort of like when we were saying like the police are killing us, the police are beating us, and they'd be like, why would they do that? What were you doing wrong? Blah, blah, blah. And then when you saw on social media just all the Black people just being killed for like sitting at a park bench, going into a Starbucks, walking down the street, running, barbecuing. Do you know what I mean? And then it was like, my wife friends were like, you mean like this is how you've been living? It's like, yeah, this is how.
Any final words on the Candyman 2022?
Gosh,
that's cool.
2022?
2022. I just want to end on just because we were talking before about like kind of current political context and everything, and like you can see so much of that in the 92 one. You can see the same thing in the 2022 one. It's like this is coming out a couple of lives after like the Black Lives Matter protests really became this really, really big thing. So we have kind of this like thing at the end with the police, and it's like, like visually you have the flashing red and blue lights the whole time, like through that whole last scene where she's confronting these cops who just killed the guy, and she actually uses the Candyman story to get out of that situation, which is brilliant. She basically like convinces them like, let me see my reflection in the mirror, and of course because these guys don't know anything about these urban legends and folklore, they're like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever, you weirdo. If this will get you to confess to the stuff we want you to confess to, then fine. And so she does it, and that's how she gets out of it in the end.
That's the girlfriend, right?
Yeah, the girlfriend.
And then they the cops shoot Anthony. Is that correct? Is that how he dies?
My brain isn't giving me that.
Yeah,
I've only seen the film once.
I think they killed him. His girlfriend, I mean, I'm not knocking his girlfriend, I understand. She kind of let him get killed. And did get out of it. I mean, I don't blame her, but but then Tony Todd's Candyman kind of appears as like a phantasm, sort of a shot at the end. So, it's really ambiguous as to whether like maybe Anthony died, but maybe he did succeed in really summoning the original Candyman back into our reality. Who knows?
Yeah. I read it as
him
him kind of like becoming the new one, like.
But he died. That's just
yeah.
But he physically. That's what I didn't get.
I mean, fair. I don't know.
But maybe he didn't. I don't know.
It's kind of open to interpretation.
Maybe he turned into the Tony Todd.
That's kind of what I was thinking, because that's how I tend to like read stories like this, where it's like an ongoing cyclical like legend thing. It's like the new one becomes the thing, but I don't know.
Well, thanks for everything. We had a good time. We'll have to do a part 3 soon.
Yeah.
Because I have 2 incredible movies I still haven't talked about.
God, all of the Black cinema ever. Yes, let's keep going. This is great.